有朋来访不亦乐乎，今天的客人是谁呢？观众朋友大家好，我是 Ann， 欢迎收看谁来做客。第一次离家的大学生心情如何呢？经验又是如何呢？要准备上大学了，有哪些是该带，哪些是不该带的呢？预备要上大学前，什么是最重要的呢？今天我们节目很荣幸为您邀请到三位大学生 Benjamin Sun、Allison Su and Ariana Su 来我们节目当中做客。如果你喜欢我们节目的话，记得按下小铃铛键订阅，就可以及时收到最新的节目哦。今天我们很开心，三位大学生来我们节目当中做客，欢迎你们！节目的一开始，是不是先请你们介绍一下你们的名字，现在念大几，在哪个学校，还有学什么专业？我们从 Benny 先开始好啦。
Hi, my name is Benny. I am a senior at NYU studying media culture and communication.
谢谢 Benny。Allison，
Hi everyone, my name is Allison. I am a third year cognitive science, data science, and sociology student at UC Berkeley.
谢谢 Allison。Ariana，
I'm Ariana, and I'm a sophomore at Cornell University studying information science.
首先我想先问问你们哦，大学的生活跟你们本来预期的一样吗？
I can take this one first. I think that, well, to answer simply, no, not at all. And I think in the very best way. Growing up in the Bay Area, you see going to college is like, oh, I'm gonna join these organizations, maybe get a job, like learn
嗯
independence. But
嗯
I think the thing that nobody told me was just how totally fun it was gonna be. I think at Berkeley and like being so close to the Bay Area, there's just so many opportunities to like go out and try new restaurants, go to Oakland and San Francisco. I've got to meet a lot of really cool people. So people doing startups or social work. And I think because I have the benefit of going to a large public school, meeting all kinds of people, hearing their stories, having so many majors and classes to choose from has been really excellent. At the same time, I think going to college has also just been about different experiences. Like I'm in a student organization on campus where obviously we get to work with all of these really cool companies such as Google and Microsoft on, for example, consulting projects. But last winter break, we actually all decided to take a trip to Mexico together. And I think that sense of like fun and like having that work-life balance is something that I was really surprised by. And I don't think anybody ever really prepares you for how much fun college life is going to be. And so I think that's something that isn't advertised enough.
哇，听起来你的大学生活非常非常精彩哦。那 Benny 跟 Ariana 呢？大学生活跟你们想的一样吗？
Um, Honestly, it was really hard to imagine what college life would be, especially now looking back on the ideas and impressions I had. You really don't think about a lot of the nuances and specifics of the whole process, especially deep into your college career. And you certainly don't have a strong grasp of very literal things like space and time and, the effort that puts into different things. Even in my imagination of what college would be like, it was very splotchy. I either only thought about what I would be doing academically or only thought about what I would be doing socially. Everybody will have a different impression and idea of what college is before they go into it, but the totality of it is very, very hard to imagine, just like any other stage of life.
是真的。Ariana 呢？
I feel like my concept of college going in was largely based on college vlogs I saw on YouTube. And in a lot of those, people highlight the most exciting, the most unique parts of their life, whether that's like going out on trips with friends, doing some cool workshop at school. But honestly, some of my favorite and most memorable parts of college life has been hanging out with friends in more like intimate settings, which I feel like isn't shown a lot on media. But that's when you really get to know your friends and you make some of those lifelong friendships that everyone looks forward to in college.
听起来也是蛮好的诶，不过我还蛮好奇的哦，就是大学都是你们第一次真的完全离开家里，对不对？不知道这样子的经验对你们当初有没有什么留下什么想法呢？这样的经验对你有什么影响？我们从 Allison 先开始好了。Allison 其实是虽然是离开家，但是算是离家最近的，对不对？
Yeah, the joke I make is that I never do my laundry at Berkeley. I don't even like it's like really funny. I don't even qualify for the away from home car insurance because I live like 40 minutes away. I'm from the Bay Area.
Right.
But I think in terms of moving away from family, I think what I really learned is to just cherish and value the time that I spend at home. Like I go home, I try to go at least once a month, and I'm very fortunate that my roommate is also from the Bay Area, so we can take the train together. It's about an hour. And I think every time I go home, I try to make the effort to like spend time with my sister. When I'm with my family, we'll like pick a restaurant and make a reservation. Going to school, even though I've met all these lovely people and my roommate and I are very, very close, I think you very quickly learn that nobody really supports you and cares for you unconditionally like your family does. And I think I'm very fortunate to go to a school where I can go home often. But I think going to college has only made my relationship with my family closer. Now, every family vacation that we take means so much more to me. Every time I get to see my sister and my dog, I like really see these experiences as very special. So even though I'm kind of cheating and I don't live too far from home, I think it's one I really do appreciate choosing the school that was close to home. I think I used to think there was a little bit of shame in that. Now I know there isn't. But yeah.
那我们再问问看 Benny 跟 Ariana，你们真的就离家很远的，可能没有办法像 Allison 这样一个月回家一次，或是都不用在学校洗衣服哦。你们当初刚搬离家里搬到学校，有什么样的感受？Benny，你要不要先讲一讲？
Yeah, and I mean, I had a pretty opposite experience, once I was dropped off in September, I didn't go home until that December. And especially with the dorm I was living at the time, it was a very complete experience. There was a kitchen, there was a living room, and there was, the expectation that you were to clean your own facilities. There was, I had to do my own laundry, I had to do my own grocery shopping to that extent. And so it was a very, very deep end sort of plunge for me to figure out and navigate what it meant to be not only a student but just a operating person in especially such a big city. And that was difficult in its own way, but the advantage of that was that I never really looked back. Homesickness wasn't necessarily something that was an issue of mine, but it also wasn't such a concern of mine because I had so many things to think about. It was very, very enlivening for me to have to navigate these new experiences and these new challenges and think back to my life at home with my family on how my parents would navigate these versus how I should in the context that I was living in. So it was obviously very terrifying, and there were moments where I felt very, whether it be very alone or very strung out or very scared of the prospect of doing one of the many things that I had to with my new life. But it was always ended up being a fun challenge that I ended up learning a lot from every single day, whether it was how to clean the toilet or which vegetables can stay in your fridge for however long.
不过我蛮好奇哦，在那些你感到孤单、感到吓一跳、害怕的时候，你当初是怎么克服的？
I mean, it was very much a blessing to be in such a large city because there were so many things I could do for both fun and that aligned with my interests and great people to meet. It was very, very reassuring, especially with my classmates, to be in similar situations where everybody was away from home for the first time and everybody was trying to navigate these things. So you find a lot of solidarity and solace in not only the community at school that is having the same exact experiences as you, having the same exact troubles as you, but also the wider community and wherever you live. It just felt like there were so many more people who understood me both personally and externally in this new space. So it wasn't all that difficult to navigate in those moments.
嗯，太好了，太好了。那 Ariana 呢？你也是离家非常远哦。刚搬离家的时候的心情是怎么样？
Everything was actually super new and exciting when I first moved away from home, so I wasn't really homesick at all. Instead, most of my calls home were just me being excited about all the things that was going on and sharing all the tidbits from my life with my family. I'm pretty thankful that I was able to see my family every few months, even though I didn't come home that often. So my family visited me at school during fall break. And then I came home for winter break, and then I also did a family trip during spring break. So I actually got to see them a few times throughout the year. But even while I was there at school, I had a lot of friends near me who were also from the Bay Area. So we would often like hang out together and comfort each other if we felt sad. And I felt like I could turn to them if I had problems. But I also made sure to call my family pretty regularly, just to have that in my schedule, and make sure we're staying in touch. So that definitely helped as well.
嗯，听起来在那边有一些朋友，然后跟家里保持联络，都是很好的一个办法哦。我想，对于刚要上大学的，真的住哪里是一个很大的决定，对不对？你们当初刚要上大学的时候，是不是也会有这样子的一个问题？我想每个学校的住宿的情况都不一样，你们是不是可以分享一下你们学校住宿的情况？然后你们当初是怎么选择，怎么住哪里啊？有没有室友这些的？
I was gonna say, well, first of all, the dorms at Berkeley are like legendarily bad. There's just a lot of things that you hear about them, and when I was applying to housing, I was like, oh, like it's over. But I like to say that I really did win the lottery with my housing situation, both my freshman year and after like sophomore year when I was looking for my apartment. And I'd say the advice I have for housing, I'm not sure what it's like in every market, but at Berkeley, the housing market is pretty expensive. It's Bay Area rent. And there's a lot of places that'll kind of like prey on students knowing that you really need an apartment. And so honestly, my housing advice, and take this with a grain of salt, is just as long as you have a roommate that you care about, don't worry too much about like signing, well, at least I didn't worry too much about signing for an apartment on time or getting the best luxury apartment. If you are in the area or if you know that you're kind of the person who can afford to wait, definitely wait until you find an apartment that fits all of your requirements and that is in your price range. Because I know a lot of people who sign too early or tour too early because you feel like you need to have a lease early on. And in my experience, that's just not the case.
嗯，所以听起来一个好的室友真的是可以弥补很多很多的问题诶。不知道 Benny 呢？Benny 跟 Ariana 的经验呢？
Thing about NYU housing that was so interesting to begin with was that there are so many options for everybody. You could end up in a room with two other people in a unit with nine other people, and there's no kitchen, and all nine people use a bathroom. Or you can end up in a unit with another person, and there's a kitchen and there's a bathroom, and you have laundry on your floor. So it was really such a nuanced decision to choose where to live.
所以你们是自己选择吗？还是学校会帮你们指派？
We had the opportunity to rank our choices, at least for my school. I know this is kind of similar for a lot of schools, but you rank your choices based on needs, such as who you want to live with, what kind of person you want to live with if you're not choosing your own roommate, availability, needs, income, all of these factors. Because obviously living with yourself is going to cost a whole lot more than living with eight other people. But there's just a lot of factors that went into deciding both personally and externally. How far was this from campus? How far is this from where I hang out and things like that? For me, one of the priorities was that I wanted a kitchen and wanted to make sure that I wasn't living too close to campus. I knew that I would succumb to the whole rolling out of bed 15 minutes before class thing. So I wanted to give myself kind of some space between where I lived and where I worked and where I played. Now, obviously, I think this decision means a lot, and a lot of people I know were hugely influenced by the places they live, whether that was their friends or their habits. But fundamentally, I think any place you live is what you make of it. For some, at the very least, a dorm is just a bed that you go home and sleep. You study in the library, you eat in the dining hall, all of these things. And for some, your dorm is a home, that you are in all hours of the day, that your friends are often in. And so I think it really just depends on, the kind of person you are, the needs you have, and also fundamentally, once you get there, opportunities that arise from it that really define how your first year housing goes.
嗯，真的，每个学校真的都不一样诶。那不知道 Ariana 你的学校呢？
Yeah, so at my school, we have a lot of different housing as well, but they're all more like your traditional dorm. So I got really lucky my first year where I got put in one of the newer dorms that was built like 2 years before I moved in. So we had AC, we had elevators, we even had like our own cafe in my dorm. So it was super nice. For my first year, I decided to go with a single. So all incoming freshmen are allowed to pick. They rank their top priority from like single, double, triple, or even a quad. And you can decide what kind of living situation you want. I decided to go with a single just because I've heard so many horror stories of people maybe being with friends with their roommates in the beginning, but then falling out. So I just didn't want to deal with that my first year. And honestly, being in a single was pretty nice. Even though I wasn't in my room that much, it was nice to have that space to decompress at the end of the day. And you really don't get as lonely as you might think without a roommate. You honestly spend a lot of time studying, like in the libraries, in the cafes, or like in study lounges. So you don't end up spending that much time by yourself in your room. And it's nice to have that space open if your friends want to come over. You don't have to worry about like disturbing your roommate while they're studying or anything like that. And then for my next year, I guess I won't be as lucky. For our sophomores and upperclassmen, we have they're randomly given different time slots, and based on your time slot, that's when you would pick your housing. So next year I got put into an older dorm, but I'll be rooming with a good friend of mine, so I'm sure it'll be a great time as well.
听起来你也是，就是真的有一个好室友是非常重要的哦。不过，就像你刚刚也有提到，你们也听，可能应该都听过很多恐怖的故事，对不对？关于宿舍、关于室友的，可以稍微分享一点点你们听过的恐怖故事，还有你们会建议再来刚要入学的大一新生要怎么能够避免这些恐怖的事情发生，或是如果碰上了，你们有什么好建议？
I didn't hear too many horror stories going in, but I
所以
will
大家可以
say,
放心哦，没有那么恐
yeah,
怖，对不
I
对？
will say when I was in the dorm, I was like, I mean, some of like the guys, like they just like never take their trash out, or they'll have like takeout and it's like moldy and you'll hear about that. Or like both of the dorms next to me, it was like girls who would like fight. And at night it would be like doors slamming. Like I think it's a lot of people's first time living alone and a lot of people's first time sharing a space. Like I like to say that I got it out of my system sharing a room with my sister when I was younger. But I would say, as far as making sure that your roommate and you have a good relationship, the one thing that I really internalized, well, two things I really internalized was one, this is not your room, this is you guys' room. Meaning that if something's like out of place or like if something's messy, like maybe that's just how somebody else lives. And like just because it doesn't look exactly the way that you would want your room to look, that's fine because it's not your room. It's a room that you're sharing. And on the other hand, because you are sharing a room, like this isn't just your space to trash, you know, like maybe if you're living in a single, you can afford to leave your stuff out a little bit more. But the courteous thing to do is to like make your bed in the morning or clean your desk off. And I think once you really understand that, like, this is a room that we're sharing with a person who I actively want to have a good relationship with, it's almost kind of like in the initial stages of like meeting somebody where you're kind of like trying to impress them and trying to do right by them. And I think that's really helped me and my roommate so far. Also, if there's like certain chores that you don't like to do, for example, I really don't like vacuuming because it's really loud, but my roommate really doesn't like do the dishes because she just doesn't like to like get all up in there. Like, so I do all of the dishes and she does all of the vacuuming. And like, that's what worked out for us. I think the second thing is I made a commitment to myself. If I'm not going to bring it up, I'm not going to be upset about it. So all of the issues that I had with my roommate, for example, if one of us was staying up too late and that bothered me, I would say, well, I'm either going to bring it up with her nicely and say, hey, like I would kind of like for us both to like get to bed at this time because I have to go to class early or something like that. But if I knew that I wasn't comfortable mentioning it to her and it wasn't something I was going to try to fix, then every time I noticed it, I'm going to be like, I can either be upset about it or I can either be upset about it and bring it up, or I can try to find some kind of way to get over it. I think that there really is no reason to have a bad relationship with a person that you're literally sharing a room or a home with. And I feel like that process has just really helped me know that like this is somebody who I really, really care about. And just because there's ways that we live that are different doesn't mean that they're necessarily bad. And there's so many things I love and respect about this person. And I know that if I speak to her about it, she'll probably be very attentive to what I'm saying. And I think, well, we're renewing our lease for a third year. So I think it's worked pretty well so far.
那非常好的建议跟分享。菲尼呢，有没有什么建议，或是有
Yeah.
听过什么恐怖的故事？
Yeah, I mean, when you say roommate horror stories, what comes to mind is, I go to a pretty big school, so a lot of the time stuff will make the news. I think last year, the year before, there was an incident where a roommate ended up stealing and selling tens of thousands of dollars worth of her roommate's jewelry and selling it online. Now, and I think the blessing and the curse of roommate horror stories is that it's never going to happen to you. That there is never two similar horror stories. So, you hear these, stories of very, very drastic stories. Rest assured that's not going to happen to you.
不用自己吓自己哦。
On the other hand, some totally bizarre, possibly weirder, possibly more mundane thing will almost definitely happen to you. So, there's a lot of common wisdom to take into these roommate relationships, like Allison said. My big thing is to, whatever you do not enter a roommate cold war. Do not, for a while in freshman year, me and my roommate, every time we walked by the thermostat, we would change it 10 degrees to something that we wanted it. And it was a miserable way to live. There's no reason for nobody to be taking out the trash just because your roommate's not doing it. Now there's just trash in your room. You know what I mean? Like, this is not something that you really want to be super, passively confrontational about. Communication is such a key. Think about how you would react if someone very reasonably asked you to take out the trash. Think about how you would react if someone asked you to vacuum. And fundamentally, I think Allison is very correct that this is someone you are living with, but more importantly, this is somewhere you are living. If you are living in a household with 4 people and nobody is cleaning the toilet, sometimes the best move is just to take it upon yourself and clean the toilet, because the other option is having a really gross toilet. So, I think that is the kind of thing to consider about, who you are living with and who and where you are living with, that this is still fundamentally a space that is yours, and you have the responsibility and onus to take care of it.
是的，是的，这是一个非常好的一个想法，就改变整个环境了。我想，Ariana，你虽然没有室友，但是你可能也听过一些故事，或是再来也会有室友，有什么想法呢？
Just echo that communication is key once again. Even though I didn't have a roommate this year, I did share a bathroom with 4 other girls in my pod. In the beginning of the year, no one was cleaning the shower, so the drain was clogged with all sort of hair, and it was absolutely disgusting. But one of the other girls in my pod left a note in the shower, was like, "Hey, this is getting out of hand. Let's all agree to pick up the hair from the drain and just clean up after ourselves." And after that, it wasn't an issue at all. So yeah, don't be afraid of just letting other people know how you feel. Definitely don't bottle things up to yourselves. You're only going to explode and things aren't going to get better at all. So be brave and take that step and let people know how you're feeling.
这也是很棒的建议。既然我们讲到宿舍哦，我想很多大一新生现在开始在预备要带去学校的东西哦，有的可能会带太多，对不对？什么都想带，但是有的可能又好像不太够。你们觉得有哪些是一定要的，或是哪
Yeah,
些是
that's
不
what
需要
that's what I
的？
was gonna say. A lot is 不需要. And I think maybe it's because I'm like an overpacker and like I am a girl with like a bunch of clothes and accessories. And I also have the fortune of living very close to where I go to school. So it's like, oh, like 忘记就回家, or my dad likes to say like 为什么要回家?忘记就买. But maybe this isn't the best advice for somebody who's living very far away, or if you have a very specific way you like to live. But I would say do a little bit of research about the style of your dorm, and also remember your own preferences and what works for you. For example, I kind of like a harder mattress, so I never had a mattress topper. I didn't want a mattress topper, and like that's like the thing that everybody says you need, but like I didn't want one, I didn't need one. Also a shower caddy. I bought a shower caddy and never used it because at Berkeley it so happened that in my dorm there were lockers very close to our bathroom. So like I never took my shower caddy around, and now I just like hope that my sister is going to use it because it's just sitting in our house. I know this is advice that they typically don't give to you, but bring all your clothes. I know that's like terrible, and people are like, don't bring all your clothes. You're not going to need all that. You do need all that clothes, especially if you're a girl like me, where like, you like to go out, you like to go to events, you like to like go to new places, like bring like your dresses, like those boots that you thought you were never going to wear, like college, especially if you're going to school in like a big city like New York or like Berkeley, where style is a little bit more experimental. You will get to, it's like really fun. You'll get to wear, you'll get the chance to wear all those things that you kind of collected through high school. I think it seems really reductive, like, oh, don't buy all of these dorm essentials and just bring a bunch of clothes. Like that's advice you're never going to see on the internet. But I wish it was advice that was given to me because I ended up going through a lot of like the online lists of things that I would need that were not specific to my dorm. And I was like, oh, like I don't need all of like these other like accessories and stuff, but like those were the things that were special to me. Those were the things I reached for the most in my life. I also heard some really good advice, which is imagine your day, like if you wake up, what are the things that you reach for? Like your cleanser, you know, like your toothbrush, etc. Kind of walk through what you think a day in your life would be and just like bring those items. And my last comment is make sure to bring socks. I did not bring any socks to freshman year. So do that.
非常好的一些建议哦。Benny 呢？哪些要带，哪些不要呢？
Yeah. Honestly, I always err on the side of underpacking, or at least that's advice, because it's I'm hard pressed to think of a place in America that Amazon doesn't deliver to, that doesn't have a Target, that doesn't have a Walgreens. And for everything you don't bring, that's a thing you could buy. But for everything you bring, that's a thing you're gonna have to move out with you come May. So it's a really, really tough choice in the initial packing stage. And I would advise to think critically when approaching things like dorm lists and dorm essentials. Like Allison said, some people just don't need a shower caddy and some people really need shower shoes. So think critically based on testimonies from your own school, people who lived in your own dorms. And really, I would just err on the side of caution. Amazon 1 day delivery means that the second day you move in, you can make up for anything you are missing. The one thing I will highly recommend every single person have is cleaning supplies. You can never have enough of them. A Lysol wipe will go a really, really long way, and you would be surprised how many people seem to not have one. A toilet brush is a wonderful thing, and all-purpose cleaning spray is an incredibly cheap tool for everybody to stay happy, clean, and moldless. I would maybe be more concerned about things that you need in a pinch that you wouldn't be able to get, whether that's medicine or over the counter drugs that you really take for granted for being in your medicine cabinet. But really, most things are within arm's reach, no matter where you are in this modern age. And I would, really, really advise against overpacking, especially people traveling far and wide, because one day, sometime in the future, you're going to be putting that in a box, and that's another 2 pounds to that box that somebody is going to have to lift.
Yeah,
很
actually,
好
I
的。
wanna I wanna amend my statement now that Benny's given his whole spiel. Maybe don't bring all your clothes because the way that I brought all my clothes is like 3 IKEA bags in my dad's trunk. And I just know that's not practical for everybody.
如果坐飞机的话就比较难哦，不一样哦。呀，那 Ariana 呢？有什么是该带，有什么是不该带的呢？
This is definitely very school dependent. At my school, they have a great sale at the beginning of the year where you can buy clothes, school supplies, bedding, vacuums, all sorts of things for dirt cheap, like $1 or $2, maybe $5 max. It's a super good deal. So definitely err on the side of caution. Don't bring anything unless you know that you're definitely going to need it. And you can definitely get things there if you're traveling. So once you get there, check out your dorm situation, figure out if you actually need that vacuum or if there's a communal one you can use. And then that's when you can actually go do the shopping. I know some people might be worried about the stores running out of supplies, but honestly, you can get anything on Amazon these days, so it's super easy. One thing that I personally found to be kind of surprising was like the need for a fridge. At my dorm, we had a fridge on like every single floor, but they were a communal fridge, and people had food in there from like orientation week that was never cleaned out. But for me, because I thought I had that communal fridge, I didn't get a mini fridge from my own room. So that was probably one of my biggest regrets. If you like to keep your own snacks, or like have drinks on hand, super convenient. I would highly recommend. But just know that you will have to move that out at the end of the year, which can be annoying. Um, but yeah, like others have said before, definitely reach out to other people from your school and see what has helped them, because that would be the most personalized.
Just
也
just
是。
to I think just to add on to Ariana, I think especially with things like fridges, or in my case, things like microwaves or fun novelty things like record players, you may have the urge to buy nice and buy high quality, but there is a chance that that will stay in your dorm past May and you will abandon it and never see it again. So keep that in mind. When you buy pretty much anything that's a hassle to move, ask yourself, would I be willing to leave this in my dorm lobby come May? And if the answer is no, maybe downgrade a few steps.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
if you're somebody who, sorry, just the one, I love talking about stuff. So one last thing about stuff. If you are someone who is like a little bit more high maintenance, like you want the coffee machine in your room, you want your own vacuum cleaner, you want like a really nice like a Dyson Airwrap whatever styling kit. That's something that like you should let people know. I think like the big thing on my freshman floor that was super helpful that Ariana kind of touched on, like the idea of communal stuff. Like there was somebody who had a microwave and like anytime somebody needed to microwave something or like a printer, we'd be like, hey, like, can I borrow this? Can I borrow that? And if you can be that person who's like, oh, like, I have this vacuum, so if anybody ever needs it, like, I feel free to borrow it from me. Not only are you getting more utility out of your purchase, it's also a way to get to know the people on your floor to be like, hey, like, come into my room anytime. And like, you'll probably find that a lot of these things that you need, like, if one person has a vacuum, one person has a kettle, one person has like, I don't know, like a stovetop grill in their dorm. Like that's like a really good way to get connected with people. So if you're gonna be that kind of person who wants to buy something nice, maybe try to share it and you'll meet a friend.
这也是很棒的建议。我想我们讲了该带什么，不该带什么，其他譬如说像心情上的准备呢，或是有其他在要进大学前，最后暑假这个月，你们会建议大家预备些什么？
On the end of being at home, your last days at home, there will never be enough time to say goodbye to your friends and your family and all the people around you, assuming you are moving away, that are no longer going to be staples in your life. I always think about the how vastly it changed that for a while I was seeing my friends from school every single day, and now I see them 3 times a year, if that. So you can never really say enough goodbye to your friends. This is the time to really strengthen those bonds and commit to staying in touch with those people. Now looking towards college, giving yourself a good landing pad is a really great way to stay motivated and follow through on your commitments in those first few weeks. Whether that is doing a lot of research ahead of time on what's fun, buying yourself a little concert ticket come October, so at least you have one thing to look forward to. Already getting in touch with people from your school off online communities and messaging groups that I know are very popular these days. There's never enough preparation you can do to give yourself a really, really good, strong 2 feet to land on once you get to college. I got to college knowing a bunch of restaurants I wanted to try, a bunch of music venues I wanted to see, a bunch of opportunities I wanted to chase, and that gave me come the Labor Day, I really had a great sense of what I was doing with my everyday, and I was really grateful for that in hindsight.
真的是很好的建议。Alison 跟 Ariana 呢？
Agree. Do as much research as you can about your school, whether that's like mapping out your journey from your dorm to your classes, finding like the closest dining halls, the best cafes around the area, just so you have a sense of what your daily life is going to look like. I think it's also really helpful to start looking into organizations you might be interested in joining. Some do start doing like Zoom sessions over the summer for incoming freshmen, so that could be helpful. Otherwise, just like checking out their social media, checking out their websites, you can see and like prepare for the upcoming activities in the fall semester. I guess besides that, it's nice to stay in touch with your friends from your hometown. So make sure you hang out with them and say your goodbyes. But yeah, like Benny said, definitely try to put in that effort, especially the first few weeks, when you're meeting lots of people at school, but you also want to stay in touch with people from home and don't want to forget about them.
也是很棒的建议。Alison 呢？
Yeah, I want to echo what Ariana said about like preparedness, specifically relating to campus organizations. I know that Berkeley is notorious for having like really competitive on-campus like student organizations and clubs, and also like Greek life, or we have like dance teams that start auditioning in the summer and they have workshops you can go to. It is your freshman year and it's your first time on campus. And so things are going to feel like, oh, there's going to be like a smooth transition from orientation. But I think the reality of it is like for people who've like been going to the school first couple weeks are like when they start to like when recruitment for sororities and fraternities kicks up, it's when clubs start opening up their coffee chats and doing tabling. And I think that can all be really overwhelming, like we've mentioned, but it can also be really, really exciting. And I think that for, any big state school, UCLA, UC Berkeley, what they'll usually have is, this was so ridiculous. It was like this like 1,000 index list of like all the different organizations on campus, from like Berkeley Venture Capital to like Berkeley Coffee Club. And if you can, I really recommend just like going through it and like seeing and bookmarking which organizations you'd like to join, like maybe looking at a couple links, seeing who's involved in these organizations. That way, during tabling, which happens on most campuses in the first couple weeks of the semester, I know we're getting very technical now, you can kind of know which tables you want to go up to, which organizations you have interest in. And if you can go up to them and be like, hey, like, I read about you on this website. Oh, I saw your recruitment timeline. As somebody who's like been on now the other side of that kind of recruitment, that really does give you an edge in joining the kind of organizations that you would like to be a part of. And also, of course, kind of go in with the idea that you are a student and you're curious and you want to get to know as many people as possible. I think the best advice that I got going into college was from a high school teacher that I had. And she kind of told us this like in the last couple weeks of school, where she says, don't let yourself be fit into the imaginary circles that you draw around communities. I think people make fun of Berkeley for not being very diverse. It's a lot of like startup bros and CS majors, but that's not the case. 40,000 people go there from all over the world studying all kinds of different things. And I think there's a tendency, especially coming from the Bay Area, for people to stick together wherever they go, whether that's at UMich or Penn or Cornell. The truth is that a lot of people from the Bay Area tend to go to most elite universities. And I feel like there's kind of an inclination to just be around the people that you're familiar with, do the things that you're familiar with. But I think there's a lot of value in just being curious and branching out. Like the first organization, I was not a business major at all, but the first organization that I felt like was home on campus ended up being a business organization. And the way that I joined was because somebody flagged me down at a table and I was like, yeah, I'll take a flyer, I'll listen. So just like being willing to do things that you didn't think you would do, being willing to speak to people that, you typically wouldn't be friends with, maybe because of where you're from or like people with different interests than you. I think that's very valuable. And I could not recommend it enough.
哇，谢
Yeah.
谢，真的是好棒的建议。
And,
Benny，
and I think just the fundamental crux of as you enter freshman year is in these months, don't worry, that there's a lot to think about and that there's a lot to handle and there's a lot of, procedures to follow. But, fundamentally, you are entering a system and structure and infrastructure that is set up for you to succeed to some extent. And so, don't worry that things are going to work out and that they're going to feel rocky at first, and things might feel kind of off for a while, but, things will work out. And that in this time, maybe the most detrimental thing you could do for yourself and everybody is to worry excessively. So, don't worry, everything is going to be okay.
很棒的建议耶，真的会让这些马上要进大学的孩子们心里觉得比较放松一点哦。今天真的很谢谢三位大学生给我们这么好的分享跟建议，谢谢你们，也谢谢观众朋友们的收看。有朋来访不亦乐乎，我们下期节目再见。有朋来访。